Hello, good afternoon, guys. Good afternoon. I hope everyone's doing well. So today we bring to you the analysis for AILET 2022 जो आज हुआ है. So as you all know, AILET is the entrance exam for NLU Delhi, and इस साल we had a slightly new pattern for AILET as well. So few surprises were expected, but I would say that थोड़े उससे कम surprises आए. So we've got our entire team here to discuss all of the different sections that were there in AILET 2022, and we'll discuss those sections and any questions that you may have after that. Okay, so let's just have a look at a broad picture of what the exam looked like. Again, 90 minutes, 150 questions. It was 50 questions in English, all of them passage based. 30 questions for general knowledge, almost all of them current affairs based, and logical reasoning, which was heavily dominated by critical reasoning. Now, overall, we found that, it was a lengthy paper. If you were not wise about choosing which questions to attempt and which passages to attempt, then things would have been difficult. But if you followed what we had discussed yesterday of, following that marks by time वाला ratio, अगर आपने वो follow किया होता, तो आज शायद आपके लिए थोड़ी सहूलियत हो गई होती. Right, overall, because of the length, we feel that overall feeling हमारी first impression ये है कि थोड़ा moderate to tough रहा. Now let's have a look at it from section to section. Right, तो English section entirely passage based. कोई क्या कहते हैं, देखते ही आंसर करने वाला कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं था. 9 passages थे. What was then general knowledge, mostly current affairs. Some static GK questions were asked that were based on the current affairs, as in this is some static GK questions. Your Durand line was asked, right? Again, some current affairs gave inspiration to some static GK questions. In our logical reasoning section, again, some analytical reasoning questions, very few legal reasoning questions, no QA, but majority was critical reasoning. And the questions were straightforward. मतलब अगर आप question बिना time limit के solve करो तो solvable है, पर otherwise time constraint was a big issue. This was the overall impression that was at a glance. So let's start with first impressions. Classic AILET paper, लंबा पेपर था जो हमें हर साल ही होता है. कुछ क्वेश्चंस ट्रिकी होते हैं, कुछ पैसेजेस ट्रिकी होते हैं, ये हर साल की कहानी. देन इस साल थोड़ा सा और लेंदी रहा, स्पेशली कंपेयर टू लास्ट ईयर 2021 के कंपैरिजन में, क्योंकि इंग्लिश पूरा का पूरा इंग्लिश, एक तो इंग्लिश का सेक्शन बढ़ गया. पहले 30-35 का होता था, 50 का हो गया, तो और 9 पैसेजेस आ गए, राइट. एंड नो QA, but some LA, as AILET had said that they may ask questions of legal reasoning in logical reasoning, that they came through on their promise. So let's start with English. Shreya ma'am, could we have your views?
Yes. Hi everyone. I hope your paper went well. Right. English section, I know, could have been scary. It was in fact very scary. First impressions, 9 passages, 50 questions, something that we had not expected, because AILET is one of those जहाँ पे आपके पास एक buffet of questions होते थे earlier. That means there was a lot of scope to do a lot of things, right? Whether it was parts of speech, या फिर parajumbles, even vocabulary was an interesting part there. Is baar they did include all of that. I wouldn't say that they did not ask that, but they asked you through the passage, which again, क्योंकि again that many questions, that many passages, आपके लिए थोड़ा वो ढूंढना मुश्किल हो जाता कि कौन सा वाला क्वेश्चन मैं अटेम्प्ट कर सकता हूँ या कौन सा वाला फर्स्ट साइट पे देख के मुझसे वो अटेम्प्ट होता. I wouldn't say that there were no such questions. थे जरूर, there were vocabulary questions, there were parts of speech questions, grammar questions थे, phrasal verbs type के questions भी थे. But आपके लिए वो चीज ढूंढना would have been a task, right? Other than that, when you have 9 passages, you'd obviously expect कि मैम सारे तो नहीं हो पाएंगे. That I agree, right? Now I'm sure आपने या तो attempt करे होंगे तो बहुत time waste किया होगा, और अगर नहीं करे होंगे then you'd have actually looked for the shorter ones, and वो shorter ones were trickier. Problem ये थी जितना छोटा passage उतना number of questions ज़्यादा, and the kinds of questions were also then tricky. They were word in context, which was all right, which was fine, but there were inference, there was critical reasoning at a certain point. हमारे पास summary था, conclusion था, title था, like those kinds of questions which you would not like to attempt or would not like to see, right? That was one thing. Lengthy जो आपके passages थे वो आसान थे. You wouldn't probably want to choose them क्योंकि आपको लगेगा कि यार बहुत lengthy है, मैं नहीं करना चाहूंगा, बट वो आसान थे, वो ज्यादा स्कोरिंग थे, That was another. Suggestion would have been कि अगर आपने पहले से number of questions per passage देखा होता, तो आपके जो पहले 3 passages थे, उनमें number of questions were just 3, 4, 3, 4. That's the maximum number of questions per passage in the first 3 ones. वो ट्रिकी भी थे, वो आसान भी नहीं थे, तो आप वो उनमें से कुछ छोड़ सकते थे for sure. But I'm assuming कि starting का जब जोश होता है and you're like अभी कर लेते हैं, अभी जितना स्टार्टिंग है सब कर लेते हैं, एंड देन पीछे लास्ट तक आते आते आप छोड़ना स्टार्ट करोगे, विच इज एसेंशियली व्हाट द नेचुरल मेंटालिटी इज. तो वो एक डिसर्विस होती है अगर आपने वैसा किया है तो. सो मे बी द फर्स्ट आइडिया वुड हैव बीन टू peruse through the whole section once and see what are the kinds of questions you're being asked, right? कैसे passages आ रहे हैं, एक rough overview, because there's something that we always tell our students कि अगर RC है तो without reading your RC, first go and read your questions and see what are the kinds of questions that they are asking you and then strategize, right? तो अगर आपने वो काम किया है तो then I'm sure you'd have been making a judicious choice. एक अच्छा आपने educated guess मारा होता कि ठीक है ये passage I will be able to do, ये मैं कर सकता हूँ, इसको attempt करूंगा, irrespective of the length, right? क्योंकि हमारा idea होता है कि it's always about the length, so that's not what it should have been. The other thing is कुछ questions जैसे word in context थे, कुछ questions जैसे parts of speech पे थे. I am assuming कि बच्चों ने अगर questions read किया, they might want to attempt them without reading the passage, which was doable. हो पा रहा था, क्योंकि सबसे बड़ी बात जो इस बार ये उन्होंने करी थी was that they mentioned that sentence along with the question. So it wasn't like they had to really go back and read that again and again. वो question अच्छा खासा उन्होंने mention किया था, which could have been a good guess. I wouldn't say 100% accuracy होती. I'm sure आप passage पढ़ रहे होते तो थोड़ा सा आपको वहाँ पे help मिल जाता for sure. But that would have been one way to do it. जो आपके questions थे वो कुछ बहुत ज्यादा अलग भी नहीं थे. It wasn't like there were too many difficult questions. Not that they asked me anything separately. Grammar का question एक पूछा था, which was again surprising क्योंकि RC maybe they could somehow incorporate some element of grammar as well. Something that they don't really do. It was a question tag पे question. Basic था, but again उनके options could have been confusing. So that was another point. एक और चीज जो मुझे लगी was even though there were 9 passages, सरल साहब, मगर सारे जो थे ना वो readable थे. It wasn't that they were very difficult to read, right? उनका easy read था. अगर आप fast reading में believe करते हो और skimming में believe करते हो तो you could have very easily done that.
Except that woodworking passage. I think apart from that, every passage was readable. Every passage was readable.
Yeah. So they had a court ruling ka passage. There was a newspaper article pe passage, right? There was an interesting one jahan pe wo comparison kar rahe the between 3 veterinarian books. Yeah. And that was an interesting one because it was a very easy read. They weren't like you have to really go inside and deep or in depth. Aisa kuch nahi tha. But having said that, you could have made a judicious choice of leaving a few passages. Right, that definitely should have been the case. I'm hoping कि सारे 9 नहीं किए होंगे बच्चों ने. Right, and then there were 2 passages which were very easy in terms of your questions. Also, number of questions भी ज़्यादा थे, readable भी था और scoring भी था. One was the interview question that was there on play therapy, which was very good, very well, good to read. Speed में read भी कर सकते थे आप. दूसरा, there was a narrative passage which was about this bride leaving the house. Right, for the first time after marriage. This was also very very easy read. बहुत ही आसानी से वो पढ़ सकते थे. Questions भी बहुत अच्छे आए थे उसके पीछे. So I wouldn't say that the entire passage was difficult. The questions weren't difficult. The passage wasn't difficult. The only problem that we would see is the number of passages and hence the time. Right. And I think out of all the questions, 50 questions में से I believe इन लोगों को at least 32 से 35 attempt हो सकते थे. अगर आपने छोड़ भी दिया स्टार्टिंग के let's say 3 passages छोड़े, that would have maybe been about 9 questions in total. उसके बाद भी नीचे वाले passages were doable. So क्योंकि those were lengthier but still number of questions ज़्यादा थे, easier भी थे, तो easily they could have done somewhere around 32 से 35.
Right. Aman sir, you also gave the paper. Did you have any thoughts? Did you find, because of your legal background, did you find some passages were easier?
Yeah, I think so. श्रेया मैम ने बहुत अच्छे से पूरा इंग्लिश का जो ये था सेक्शन था, राइट, बहुत अच्छे से मैम ने एक्सप्लेन किया. एंड आई थिंक व्हाट आई आल्सो फेल्ट वाज कि एक चीज और, right, before we start off with this, कि a lot of students have been and were asking us, right, what section to attempt first, and I always like wanted to attempt LR first, the logical reasoning section first, because it is like 70 marks का भी था, and the fact that with AILET and especially with the English section, right, जो उनका जो surprise element होता है जो आना है, right, you can't be sure about like what they're going to ask. So I think आज के एग्जाम में और मेरी like we had a word with a lot of students, कहीं ना कहीं पे students who had started with the English section first, right, and I think ये advantage या ये disadvantage exam में नहीं होनी चाहिए, but because the exam is only of like 90 minutes, right, so once you start, right, by the time you take a call कि okay यार maybe I need to leave few of these passages, तब तक शायद आप साइकोलॉजिकली भी, राइट, आपको बहुत सारा इम्पैक्ट आपको लेना पड़ सकता है, एंड एज श्रेया मैम इज लाइक क्लियरली स्टेटिंग दिस कि आप कुछ क्वेश्चंस को छोड़ सकते थे, और एज शी इज सेइंग कि 32 to 35 would have been a great attempt. That means कि आप 2 या 3 पैसेजेस को आराम से छोड़ सकते थे, बट क्या आप पेपर की स्टार्ट में वर यू रेडी टू डू दैट? बिकॉज आपको फील होता है कि नहीं, राइट, इंग्लिश, बिकॉज लॉजिकल में तो और ज्यादा आपको ये फील होता है कि वहां पता नहीं क्या ही होगा, राइट? सो अगेन आपने स्कैनिंग किया था, लाइक दैट मस्ट हैव बीन हेल्पफुल, बट आई थिंक स्कैनिंग के बाद क्या आप ये कॉल ले पाए कि आई डोंट वांट टू अटेम्प्ट इंग्लिश फर्स्ट, I would want to attempt LR first. I think that would also have made a lot of difference, because 90 minutes, I also feel कि ये बहुत ज़्यादा तेज आपको calls लेनी होती हैं. So I think that was the first thing. But I think थोड़ा सा law background का again थोड़ा आपको फायदा होता है when you are reading these passages. But trust me, when I looked at it, I was very clear that I'm gonna leave 2 passages straight away. अब वो कौन से वाले हैं, राइट, ये कॉल बाद में आना था, बट ये क्लियर था कि इस पेपर में अगर आपको कुछ छोड़ना है, राइट, और समथिंग यू शुड नॉट अटेम्प्ट और यू शुड लीव, राइट, दैट वाज फ्रॉम दिस सेक्शन, बिकॉज बाकी सब कुछ आपको अटेम्प्ट करना ही था. इनफैक्ट सीए के अंदर आई मीन वो हमारे हाथ में होता ही नहीं है, अगर आपको नहीं आता है देन एनीवेज यू विल हैव टू लीव इट. बट अदर देन दैट आई थिंक यहीं पर वो ट्रिक था कि अगर आप ये थोड़ा सा अवॉइड करते तो आपका ओवरऑल, बिकॉज at the end of the day, like what we are saying is that the paper was moderate to difficult because of the length, right? So there's a lot of focus on this particular word. So I think वो easy हो जाता आपके लिए अगर आप पहले से ही ये call ले पाते. But yeah, I think answering your question, I think yes, वो आपको थोड़ा सा फायदा तो था अगर आप if you are used to reading a lot of stuff और आप बहुत अलग-अलग चीजें पढ़ना पसंद करते हैं. I think that was a good thing, and I think this year's paper, right, AILET has, for me, I think ये एक बहुत major change होने वाला है, because when you were solving the paper, you had this feeling of maybe CLAT plus LSAT को मिलाकर अगर कुछ होता, plus CA को अगर हम अलग रखते हैं, so right, I think कुछ वैसा है, and maybe I think from now onwards we will have to take a different approach, right, as to how to prepare for CLAT or AILET, because अगर इस स्टाइल से पेपर आ रहा है, then maybe there will be a slightly different approach required for this exam. But yeah, but I think I was also surprised that they did not ask too much from I mean grammar से बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं था. Again, historically, I mean we have seen, right, कि वहाँ पर कुछ चीजें आती रहती हैं. So I think ये एक effort we can say कि right, they wanted to focus more on the comprehension part here, but I think 70 marks का या अगर LR इतना ज़्यादा है तो I think थोड़ा सा मुझे भी feel हुआ कि it was little unfair to students. In fact बहुत सारे students का पहला reaction ये था कि आप बताएं कि क्या ये English section fair है. That was the first thing we have received from a lot of students. But guys, I mean, it was the same for everyone. So even if we want to say कि it was lengthy or उससे कुछ नहीं होने वाला, right? So I think वो तो बहुत ही कुछ उसका आंसर नहीं है हमारे पास भी कि was it really needed, कि क्या ऐसा इंग्लिश होना चाहिए, we don't know, but I think it was a good paper overall.
Yeah, when I saw the paper, I sort of flipped through the pages and I'm like, 9 pages, oh my god, not even going to touch English, let's just go anywhere else. English
anywhere else, right.
Yeah.
So I think that would have worked so much, sir, कि अगर आपने वो पहले 5 मिनट में वो कॉल ले लिया है, I think that would have done wonders, because अगर आपने इसको पूरा अटेम्प्ट किया है पहले इंग्लिश को, right, then I think आप psychologically also काफी ज्यादा हिट आपने ले लिया था कि भैया ये क्या आ गया, right? So that is what we are talking about.
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. So Shreya ma'am, 32 to 35 questions.
Yes.
You would say how many questions one should get correct? 80% accuracy?
I believe so, sir. Yes. क्योंकि अगर इन्होंने, again depends on what kinds of questions they have chosen and which paragraphs they have actually left. But अगर उन्होंने 32 से 35 attempt किए हैं of kinds of the questions जो inference based नहीं है, तो accuracy ज़्यादा रहेगी.
Right. Understood, ma'am. Thank you so much for these inputs. Let's move on now to the GA section. So Aman sir, any views on the GA section? 30 questions long. What were your views on the?
I think it was doable. मतलब मुझे feel हुआ कि I think 8 to 10 questions के आसपास, and I think वो एक normal सा number होता है कि जहाँ पर you're unsure. Or I think I think 7 to 8 questions you could have, like, you know, easily left. I think like I'm also not like in touch with the GA part, but I think what I felt was कि it was doable. Why? Because unlike previous year AILET papers, there were hardly any questions from history. जहाँ पे हमें feel होता है कि why do we need to know about this, right? So I think जो इस साल के जो सारे के सारे जो surprises थे, वो सारा का सारा उन्होंने English के लिए ही रखा हुआ था, and I think there were no, you know, like any like surprises in the GK section. I think अगर किसी ने भी अगर पूरा अच्छे से तैयारी किया हुआ था, I think they would have done fairly okay in this particular section. And I also feel, sir, I think usually GK section, right, we need to get a decent score, right, because you know, everyone else is going through the same thing, right, same notes. So I think main to इस पे होना चाहिए कि it should not go bad, right, when you are appearing for such competitive exams. I think वो वाला aspect मुझे आज feel हुआ कि वो ऐसा नहीं था कि it could have gone really bad for someone, right, if they have worked hard, right. So I think वो वाला नहीं था इस साल के exam में.
Right.
Your views? आपको कैसा लगा?
I think around 10 questions were easy, as in, even though I'm not supremely in touch with all news, I think even I knew 10 questions मेरे को भी आते थे. Apart from that, few questions, I would say 5 to 6 questions were tough, as in I also thought कि यार अगर मैं ये पढ़ रहा होता during the year तो क्या I would have come across them. I would have thought कि even if I would have come across them, maybe I would not have remembered them. So I thought that in 30 questions, around 15 to 20 would have been a good attempt, and then accuracy of in GA, again, you expect, अगर आप attempt कर रहे हो तो you expect कि you know, otherwise you don't attempt GA at all. आप उसमें complete guesswork नहीं करते हो. So an accuracy of 90%, I think around 17-18 marks in this section were gettable.
Yeah, and I think that is what was expected also, right? कि आप इतना सा इसको attempt कीजिए, and if you can score this, and then you know, like what you are doing in the other section, I think वो important ज़्यादा हो जाते हैं.
Now coming to the star section of the day.
Star section.
Logical reasoning. Girish sir.
Okay. तो लॉजिकल रीजनिंग में सर कोई सरप्राइज नहीं था. अगर देखें तो लास्ट ईयर के पैटर्न को ही फॉलो किया. अगर आप लास्ट ईयर पे देखोगे, क्रिटिकल रीजनिंग का वेटेज ज्यादा था, एंड ड्यूरिंग क्लासेस मैंने इन लोगों को बता दिया था कि भाई क्रिटिकल रीजनिंग का वेटेज ज्यादा हो सकता है, तो मेक श्योर कि आप क्रिटिकल रीजनिंग पे ज्यादा फोकस करें, राइट. ऐसे ही हुआ. जनरली एलिट की हिस्ट्री है, वो किसी एक पार्ट का वेटेज ज्यादा कर देता, कभी वो बैलेंस करके नहीं चलता कि सेम नंबर ऑफ क्वेश्चंस फ्रॉम एनालिटिकल एंड सेम फ्रॉम क्रिटिकल. पहले तो क्या करता था, मोर क्वेश्चंस फ्रॉम एनालिटिकल एंड few questions from critical, and last year से उसको उल्टा कर दिया, रिवर्स आ गया, more questions from critical part and only few questions from analytical. and अगर लेवल की बात करें सर, लेवल इजी था पेपर का, the only thing is टाइम कंज्यूमिंग था. मेरा मानना ये, अगर किसी ने लॉजिकल रीजनिंग वाले पार्ट से स्टार्ट किया अगर पेपर को, अगर इस वाले सेक्शन को अगर टाइम दिया है, राइट, सो ये वाला सेक्शन स्कोरिंग था. बिकॉज 70 में से अगर आप देखें ना, 50 क्वेश्चन बहुत इजीली डुएबल थे, उनमें चांसेस थे कि आप 90% करेक्ट कर सकते हैं, राइट. व्हाई 90%? बिकॉज 18 क्वेश्चंस फ्रॉम सिलॉजिज्म, मुझे नहीं लगता सर सिलोजिज्म में से 15 से कम किसी ने भी किए होंगे जिसको सिलोजिज्म आता है, राइट। और हमने सिलोजिज्म बहुत डिटेल में क्लासेस में पढ़ा। आई होप सबको सिलोजिज्म समझ भी आया होगा। वही एक अच्छा पार्ट था सबसे पहले पेपर देखिए कि 18+ क्वेश्चंस फ्रॉम सिलोजिज्म, कि एटलीस्ट ये वाले मार्क्स तो 100% एक्यूरेसी के साथ आई कैन डू।
Although AILET was tricky about it. ऐसा नहीं कि सिलोजिज्म के सारे क्वेश्चन एक लाइन में डाल दिए, नहीं 3 क्वेश्चन अभी, फिर 3 क्वेश्चन बाद में, फिर 3 क्वेश्चन बाद में।
गुड थिंग इज एक क्वेश्चन था, आई गेस मैंने कोई क्वेश्चन देखा था क्रिएचर वाला, सेम स्टेटमेंट्स के साथ जस्ट एक स्टेटमेंट चेंज कर दे रहे थे, दे हैव 4 क्वेश्चंस। ट्रिकी था, अगर कोई ऐसा सोचे कि सेम आ गया, लास्ट स्टेटमेंट चेंज हो जा रहा था हर बार। आप सिंगल डायग्राम के साथ 4 क्वेश्चंस विद इन अ मिनट सॉल्व कर सकते थे, राइट। सो ऐसी कुछ चीजें थी वहां पर। एंड अगर आपने देखा होगा बहुत सारे क्वेश्चन सिंगल 1 लाइनर स्टेटमेंट थे, स्मॉल स्टेटमेंट 1 लाइनर स्टेटमेंट ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ दैट व्हाट इज द अजम्पशन, बहुत स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड सिंपल, बहुत ज्यादा ट्रिकी क्वेश्चन भी नहीं थे। आर्ग्यूमेंट पे बेस्ड, विच ऑफ द 3 आर स्ट्रॉन्ग आर्ग्यूमेंट, वीक आर्ग्यूमेंट, बहुत सिंपल क्वेश्चंस भी थे पेपर में। हमें जस्ट आइडेंटिफाई करना था। हाँ, स्टार्टिंग में कुछ पैसेज बेस्ड थे कि थोड़ा सा पैराग्राफ, आई गेस अराउंड 25 क्वेश्चंस पैराग्राफ बेस्ड थे, जिसमें स्मॉल पैराग्राफ इज देयर एंड ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ दैट, जो हम कल भी बात कर रहे थे, मैंने कल भी इनको क्लियरली बोला था, क्रिटिकल रीजनिंग में आपको सबसे ज्यादा क्या एक्सपेक्ट करके चलना, पैराग्राफ वाला क्वेश्चन, एंड सबसे ज्यादा वेटेज भी उसी का था। क्रिटिकल रीजनिंग में एलेट का हिस्ट्री है, एलेट को अगर क्रिटिकल रीजनिंग में सबसे ज्यादा कोई टॉपिक पूछना होता है दैट इज दैट पैसेज बेस्ड वाला पार्ट, 1 स्मॉल पैराग्राफ ऑफ 3-4 लाइंस। On the basis of that, कि ये similar question, what is the assumption from this, what you can infer from this, and strengthening statement and weakening, right? So expected था पेपर कि बहुत ज्यादा कुछ नया सरप्राइज, वहां पर सरप्राइज एलिमेंट कुछ भी नहीं था सर। सारे वही टॉपिक्स जिससे ये लोग सब फेमिलियर थे। द गुड थिंग इज सारे टॉपिक फेमिलियर, ऐसा नहीं था कि कुछ एकदम से सामने आ गया और हमने कभी नहीं किया, नो, वो सारे वही टॉपिक्स था जो जनरली हम क्लासेस में डिस्कस कर रहे थे, राइट। स्पेशली सीआर स्पेशल जो हमारी क्लासेस है, क्रिटिकल रीजनिंग स्पेशल क्लासेस, उसमें सिमिलर टाइप के क्वेश्चंस हमने बहुत बार डिस्कस किए हुए, तो वही सिमिलर पैटर्न पे क्वेश्चन आए हैं। तो क्रिटिकल रीजनिंग में ऐसा कुछ बहुत ज्यादा सरप्राइजिंग एलिमेंट नहीं था। बस ये है कि अगर किसी ने इस लॉजिकल रीजनिंग वाले सेक्शन को अगर टाइम दिया है तो उसके चांसेस हैं कि वो स्कोर अच्छा कर सकता है, राइट। एज यू ऑल सेड कि भाई अगर आप स्टक होकर रह गए पहले वीए वाले पार्ट में, and now you are left with 20, 25 और 30 minutes, तब आप पहुंचे लॉजिकल रीजनिंग में, एंड तब एक तो वैसे प्रेशर है कि अब भाई अब क्या कर पाएंगे हम इस 30 मिनट में, और स्टार्टिंग के 10 क्वेश्चंस आपने पैराग्राफ देख लिए, राइट। उन पैराग्राफ को देख के आपको लगा अब 70 तो गए तो ये एक था कि आपको पूरे पेपर को स्कैन करना बहुत जरूरी था, देखना था कि कहाँ पर इजी डुएबल क्वेश्चंस हैं, पहले उन क्वेश्चंस को करना था। अगर आप ये पैराग्राफ वाले जो क्वेश्चन थे उनको इग्नोर भी कर देते ना, तब भी आपके 40 क्वेश्चन थे करने को, राइट। 40 क्वेश्चंस ऐसे थे विद इन 30, 40, 50 सेकेंड्स में हो सकते थे, राइट। सिलोजिज्म तो आई गेस 30-40 सेकेंड से ज्यादा टाइम नहीं लगता सिलोजिज्म के जनरली क्वेश्चंस करने में। हमने डिस्कस भी किया व्हाट इज द बेस्ट मेथड टू सॉल्व दीज क्वेश्चंस, राइट। सो आई होप कि मुझे लगता है कि लॉजिकल रीजनिंग अगर आपने से टाइम दिया है तो ये आपका अच्छा हुआ होगा। इसी के बेसिस पे मुझे लगता है कि आपकी जो कट ऑफ डिसाइड करने वाला यहाँ पर सेक्शन है वो लॉजिकल रीजनिंग ही होने वाला। अगर कट ऑफ हाई जाती है तो वो इसी सेक्शन की वजह से जा सकती है, राइट। सो लॉजिकल रीजनिंग में अप्रॉक्स आई गेस 60+ क्वेश्चंस थे टोटल आउट ऑफ 70, एनालिटिकल प्लस क्रिटिकल, ओनली 6-7 क्वेश्चंस फ्रॉम लीगल, सो व्हाट इज द गुड अटेम्प्ट। मुझे लगता है अगर आपने इसमें 50 क्वेश्चंस के आसपास अटेम्प्ट किया आउट ऑफ 60 to 63 क्वेश्चंस विद एन एक्यूरेसी ऑफ 80%, ज्यादा नहीं कहते, ठीक है 80%, so that is a good score.
Right. How much time do you think, sir, it would have taken to solve these?
Sir, on an average, अगर आपको ये 50 क्वेश्चंस करने में 40 to 45 मिनट लग जाते, 45 मिनट तो मैं कर सकता, डुएबल थे कि 45 मिनट में आप 50 क्वेश्चंस कर सकते थे, बिकॉज आई एम टेकिंग इन कंसिडरेशन 18 क्वेश्चंस सिलोजिज्म के थे सर, उनको करने में मुझे नहीं लगता कि बहुत ज्यादा टाइम कंज्यूमिंग,
राइट सर,
ठीक है। एंड देन वी हैव सम क्वेश्चन अराउंड 10 to 15 क्वेश्चन सर ऐसे थे जो 1 लाइनर स्टेटमेंट, उसे रीड करने में 20 सेकंड से ज्यादा का टाइम नहीं लगने वाला है ना। तो 45 मिनट में 50 क्वेश्चंस पॉसिबल था, कर सकते थे आप अगर आपने इस वाले पार्ट से स्टार्ट किया था,
राइट सर,
राइट। तो इसमें वही 50 क्वेश्चन के आसपास अगर आपने अटेम्प्ट किया, दैट इज अ गुड अटेम्प्ट।
Sir and ma'am, this is something that we hear about AILET every year. Ki in English and in logic, they sometimes ask questions where you've got more than 2 options that seem appropriate.
Right.
So did you find a lot of such questions this time?
A lot, yes. Surprisingly, what we did find was inference based में mostly sir ये होता है, और inference वाले ही tricky होते हैं. That's where you lose a lot of marks, right? So if you were scanning your questions and seeing कि यार ये inference वाला question है, इस पे I will not probably want to spend a lot of time. And if you'd have left that, you'd have been at an advantage. क्योंकि वहां पे ही मोस्टली ऐसे क्वेश्चंस है. However, vocab में भी there were a couple of questions जहाँ पे लगा कि more than one could have been the answer. I could see कि just because of that one small connotation, जैसे एक word था उन्होंने बोला था construed,
misinterpreted and interpreted.
Exactly. So there was interpretation and then there was misinterpretation. Now the problem here is construed word as a word is a lot of times misinterpreted in itself. बहुत लोगों को लगता है कि ये गलत है, like it's a negative word. It's actually not a negative word. It is construed, like it is interpretation, understanding a certain thing. So वहाँ पे I could see that there were confusion. So definitely I think vocabulary could have been one place where they could definitely have been a little essay scared. But again, having said that, अगर थोड़ा सा टाइम लगा के सोचा होता, जो हमारे पास था नहीं, पर अगर 1 सेकंड एक्स्ट्रा दिया होता है क्वेश्चन को, तो I think पहुंच जाते आंसर पे. It wouldn't have been too difficult.
Girish sir, in logical reasoning?
वही मैंने बोला, लॉजिकल रीजनिंग में एज सरप्राइजिंग कुछ नहीं था. 50 क्वेश्चन तो ऐसे थे, उनमें बहुत ज्यादा ट्रिकी भी नहीं थे सर.
ओके,
सीरियस ऑनेस्टली अभी मैं कुछ क्वेश्चन देख रहा था, बहुत लेट्स से assumption पे बेस्ड क्वेश्चन है, तो डायरेक्ट अगर इफ यू नो व्हाट इज assumption, राइट, इफ यू नो व्हाट इज इन्फरेंस और व्हाट इज कंक्लूजन, तो आप डायरेक्ट क्वेश्चन को आंसर कर सकते हैं. बट सी ये लोग कंफ्यूज क्या हो जाते हैं, ये लोग assumption को कंक्लूजन समझ लेते हैं, कंक्लूजन को इन्फरेंस समझ के बैठ जाते हैं, तो वो एक प्रॉब्लम है. उस वजह से अगर आपको माइंड में क्लैरिटी, आपको पता है इफ क्वेश्चन इज अबाउट assumption एंड व्हाट इज assumption, मुझे क्या चेक करना है इस क्वेश्चन में, तो देन क्वेश्चन कोई भी बहुत ज्यादा ट्रिकी नहीं था. मींस 50 क्वेश्चन तो इजीली डुएबल थे, थोड़ा सा टाइम देके, बट टाइम चाहिए. ऐसे नहीं कि 20 मिनट में 30 मिनट में आप 50 कर लोगे. नो.
राइट. थैंक यू मैम, थैंक यू सर. अब एक छोटा सा सेक्शन ऑन लीगल रीजनिंग. कुछ 5-6 सवाल आए थे लीगल रीजनिंग में, एंड नथिंग फ्रॉम आवर यूजुअल एक्सपेक्टेड एरियाज, जो क्रिमिनल लॉ, टॉर्ट लॉ, नथिंग. It's legal professional ethics, whether someone should take a case or should not take a case. There was a case on bail and narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances act. There was a case on election law, whether something amounts to a corrupt practice or not. Then there were 3 or 4 questions on where would the jurisdiction lie. And in those questions, I found that the options were very tricky. I mean, if you did not read the options carefully, I can guarantee that you've attempted them wrong. Right, the options were very tricky in those questions. There was one question randomly from trademark. Again, the options were very tricky. If the options you did not read them correct, that was a problem. Then there was one question on interpretation of contracts, which I think ideally should be considered a logical reasoning question and less of a legal reasoning question. But that's how legal reasoning really works. Legal reasoning is just an outshoot of logical reasoning, right? So, Aman sir, did you find anything super tricky or difficult about the legal reasoning questions?
I think the only difficult part was to identify where legal reasoning questions were in this. Right? कि अगर आप उस mindset से गए हुए थे, I think that the catch was how to find the legal reasoning questions, right? I think other than that, it was doable. I think doable. और सर जो मैंने start में बोला, I think I will just stick to that the whole paper was actually more about your state of mind, right? कि आप कितना जल्दी और वो 90 मिनट में कितनी जल्दी ये calls ले पा रहे थे कि कहाँ पर, and as we keep saying, right, in these exams, what is important is also that what you are attempting, but what is also important is that what you are going to leave. So I don't think कि legal reasoning was that I even can't use the word section also here, ki legal reasoning, so we can't even use the word section here, but I don't think ki legal reasoning mein kuch aisa aapko chhodne wala tha. I think you could have attempted it easily, but I think overall it was nice, and maybe at least what AILET has done now is ki unhone ek scope chhod diya hai that they can play around with this number, right? That every year this number may go up and down, right? कि CR with plus the AR and plus the legal reasoning part, तो वो 70 marks में क्या होने वाला है? But I think that's again a good thing maybe. But I think it was pretty doable. और I think अगर एक या दो शायद जैसा कि आप जो हम बात बोल रहे हैं कि options शायद close तो शायद वहाँ पे error हो सकता है, but otherwise I don't think कोई कुछ major concerns थे यहाँ पे.
They weren't lengthy questions either. ऐसा नहीं कि बहुत मुश्किल या lengthy principle हो या
नहीं, right.
principle हो, ऐसा भी नहीं.
बिल्कुल. And I think the other thing we are looking at is that the what we call कि जो आपके जो main so-called जो topics हैं, right, as you just mentioned, rightly mentioned, that law of contracts or law of torts, criminal law. I think they have taken a backseat now, and even with CLAT also there were more questions from international law or family law. So I think that's a clear indication that you need to be well versed with the legal affairs, right? Not just the news part, right? But the concepts as well, right? कि अगर news में कोई concept की बात हो रही है, right? So I think we need to focus more on that. And I think students who are going to prepare for the next year's AILET exam, I think उनके लिए ये जो exam है, I think ये बहुत important होने वाला है, and all of them should try and solve this exam, or at least उनको एक attempt होना चाहिए उनका कि just to go through the paper, so that they are more aware of what is expected from them.
In fact, for people who are attempting AILET the next year, I would suggest पहले आप time limit में solve करो, उसके बाद घड़ी हटा दो, solve it without a time limit, and see कि the questions are not difficult. You will realize this once you solve this without a time limit. You will realize the questions aren't difficult. It's the time pressure that kills you. Right. Okay. So how is it that Pratham has been helping students in this? I think across sections, questions of this form, of this difficulty, have been asked consistently, whether it is in class, whether it is in handouts, notes, or other reading materials. These questions have been prevalent. And most importantly, if students attended yesterday's session, the tips that were discussed on scanning the paper and then attempting the quicker questions, that was supremely helpful today. If that was implemented today, I am sure that it would have given you an advantage of at least 5 to 10 marks, at least 5 to 10 marks. Otherwise, as Aman sir said and Shreya ma'am said, अगर आपने English से start कर लिया है, तो वो थोड़ा सा मुश्किल हो जाएगा. It would have been an uphill battle too, right? Would have been slightly difficult. So that's how we try to contribute in our students' exams, right? So final views, ideal number of attempts, Aman sir?
Oh, very tough to say, because as हमने बोला कि किस section से start कर रही हो, अगर उससे भी आपकी attempts ऊपर नीचे होने वाली हैं, तो but yeah, overall I think 110, 105, 110 was a very good attempt, I would say, keeping in mind कि अगर आपने वो सही वाले questions को छोड़ दिया था. And I think the catch was simply that कि क्या paper ने आपको force किया कि आपके questions छूट गए, या आपने ही पहले ये call ले लिया था कि ये questions मैं नहीं attempt करने वाला हूँ. I think that was the key element here. So I think 105 to 110 I think should be a good attempt.
Right. And overall difficulty and length, Girish sir, Shreya ma'am, आप भी बताएं.
Overall तो sir easy to moderate.
Length?
Because lengthy paper. Yes.
Okay, ma'am.
I would say that it wasn't anywhere near easy, honestly.
Yeah, I also.
It was a thoda sa mind play wala paper. So it was easy, but only for people who would have, scanned the paper well. So I would say moderate to a slightly difficult level, right? Not because of the question, but because of the length.
Achha, Sadal sir, if I may ask you, and I want to ask this question to everyone here, right? And whenever I appear for the AILET exam, or we write the AILET exam, kahin na kahin ye feeling aata hai ki AILET is now becoming a very elitist paper.
Yeah.
And I think today also I got this feeling that how come a student from a government school, right, who has been studying there, right, how is that student going to crack this exam? Like 90 minutes of reading, which is which now involves a lot of other elements. So I think उन्होंने उस चीज को मैं जो हमेशा से बोलता हूँ, and I think last 2-3 years I've been like an example of that the paper has become very elitist. And I think इस साल का भी, do you guys agree कि बहुत मुश्किल नहीं है, like if someone from a non, like a metro background, अगर कोई कोशिश कर रहा है, I think it's too tough.
Although I must say it has improved. AILET, back in my time, AILET has asked questions such as which of the following is a character from Star Wars.
Yeah.
Right? I think it was either a question in my year or one year before me.
Right.
What sort of a question is that? Yeah. Although in terms of AILET's exclusionary test, right? There is an issue that was pointed out to me. There are apparently one or maybe only two sections, centers, if at all, in Jammu and Kashmir. In Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh, hardly any centers and all. So in terms of it being exclusionary, I think that is also an issue that needs to be addressed. I mean, of course, this is slightly besides the point of the question paper, right? But this is something that I think should be noted, ki in places which are underrepresented in colleges, and I can tell you, I think Aman sir, you will also relate, we hardly have anyone from the Seven Sisters. We hardly ever get someone from the Andamans, hardly anyone from Jammu and Kashmir, very few people from Uttarakhand, Himachal, right? I just wonder if this is because of there being very few centers, and I'm not even going into class-based problems that AILET has, but just generally.
I think it has. I mean, like so I also agree that lawyers don't require QA, but I think QA code, like if it is not a part of the paper, right, then so many students, right, I think unke liye ye बहुत बड़ा disadvantage है, and I think it just came to my mind because I was looking at my phone, and all the students, right, who are having like or who had more problems with the paper are actually from all these like non-metro locations, right? And that's like that's what exactly hit me right now, that okay, maybe that's again the issue, right? That they were able to attempt CLAT like slightly like better, but not this paper. But yeah, I think that is like besides the point. But yeah, I think overall, if we talk about the cutoffs, I think Shreya ma'am, what would you say? Let's start with you.
You've chosen the wrong
English
because
it was all about the English section, right? I think
I think, sir, again, cutoff is very, very subjective at this point, because again, it really depends on how you've tackled it, what have you, and how well read are you in general. I'm assuming law students are in that zone where they have to read a lot because of CLAT, but given that fact, unke paas time bhi zyada hota hai. So that should also be another point to be considered. So yahan pe I think in terms of the cutoff, I think 70-80.
Okay. Great, sir.
Exactly, sir. वो 80-85 का point.
Right. Aman sir.
So again, I mean, मैंने तो बोल ही दिया है कि elitist थोड़ा है, और but I still feel that people, there will be 15% or 20% people who will have like that kind of excellent reading speed, and who would have felt कि it was doable, or like जिनका शायद strategy ज़्यादा अच्छा रहा होगा and they would have started it, right? So I think maybe 85 plus, right, or like in the late 80s, because I think last year's AILET was an exception, but I think uske pehle agar hum AILET ka if we look at the cutoffs, right, it has been in the range of 70 to 75. So I think usse thoda upar hoga, but yeah, tough to predict because of the number of seats also, right, being like so less. I mean 53 seats and close to 19,000 people, and there is a high probability सर कि बहुत सारा जो रैंक्स होंगे, राइट, वो मतलब बड़ी कॉल इट टाई, राइट, तो बहुत सारे स्कोर्स टाई होने वाले हैं, but yeah, I think based on like all of that, I think 85 to 90 could be the cutoff.
Okay, so I think we have answered every question that has been asked on chat as of yet. If there are any more questions, we'll be happy to address. Otherwise, one more week for SLAT. And then I think next month CUET is coming up, another set of exams which which you are going to be the inaugural batch who's going to be writing that exam, right? So all the best from all of us for the upcoming exams and for the counseling and the choices that you are going to make right now, right? In the coming week, we are also going to host one session on this very important question that has been asked to us a lot in the last 2 or 3 days ever since the CLAT results have come up, which is ki sir drop lena chahiye kya? So whether you should take a drop or you should not take a drop, we will sort of have a educated, sort of informed session, long session on that. Jisme we will discuss pros and cons of taking a drop. So that's something that's also coming up, and all the best from us. And thank you, Girish sir, Shreya ma'am, Aman sir, for your insights today.
Thank you.
And let's take the leave from students and let's leave them to rest for today, and then they can prepare for
maybe at least for 2 days, right? I think they deserve that, right? That now that CLAT is over and AILET is over, and I think abhi bhi bahut sare exams baki hain, so I think they should not, and as you have rightly said, that we will be talking about that issue as well, right? Whether you should be taking a drop or not. But I think right now your focus should be on the next exam, which is the CLAT, right? And we'll see you guys then. Thank you, sir, for having us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.